All right, we are live on Facebook. We are live on Facebook, Friends for Leadership, and please host different watch parties. We have a lot of organizations with us tonight. Of course, the UN Major Group for Children and Youth. To our SDG 16 Global Focal Points, please do host watch parties so that we'll have more young people watching us tonight. Happy International Day of Peace. This is Regine Guevara. I am the convener of the Asian Youth Peace Network, and I am the UN advisor of the Asian Youth Council and the Committee for ASEAN Youth Cooperation. For some, good morning. It's just the start of a good day, hopefully, good afternoon. And for my part of the world, it's good evening. Almost really tired because of back-to-back events today. This is my last one after the other, but of course, really grateful to everybody who came with us because it's really one of those very unique cases where we brought together youth organizations that don't usually collaborate at this level for this kind of theme. So we have UN Major Group for Children and Youth, Friends for Leadership, UNI Peace Builders, Asian Youth Peace Network, and the different regional youth councils here today. And then, of course, national and local youth organizations. So we have come together under the auspices of hashtag IYC4Peace, International Youth Center Foundation in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. It is a partner agency of the Ministry of Youth and Sports of Malaysia, with the patronage of the late Tan Sri Campo Harada from Japan. And really, the objective of IYC4Peace for bringing all of us here together is, of course, to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, and in doing so, aim to be a center for peace, which it has always been, but more looking at a nexus approach versus just going through the usual intercultural youth dialogues and even interfaith dialogues to more maybe humanitarian development and nexus approach. And hopefully with your inputs, it will be able to enrich their programs and we can try to establish more partnerships from the Global South where we're from, but also more meaningful partnerships between the Global North and the Global South. Key reminders for participants who are in this Zoom session, please keep yourselves on mute if you are not speaking. Practice mutual respect, curiosity, and joint contribution. And then let's try to keep respect the time allotment, maximum of 5 minutes per speaker. If we can keep it more succinct to 2 minutes, all the better. So then we could just, expand the ideas during the question and answer. And if we don't have time for question and answer, there's always a chat box. We opened it for everybody to use. So anybody can ask questions, anybody can answer. Let's make use of this. We have about 63 participants, about 100 registered. So I think more people will come in a few minutes. And then final reminder, after this panel, which is entitled Next Generation of Leaders in Peace and Security, we will have 5 regional breakouts. So if you did not register for a regional breakout, and just to be safe, maybe we could advise you to please just change your name on your Zoom account by adding the region of your choice beside your name. So in front of your name, actually. So for instance, if Donovan wants to go to the Europe breakout, he's gonna put Europe_Donovan Gutierrez. So then it will be easier for our tech team to move you to that breakout. Okay, so thank you again to our partners for today. And sorry, can we just discourage people to screen share because we want to be able to highlight whoever is currently speaking, and we have our co-hosts from MGCY to help us with that. So the young people who are coming together today come from different regions around the world: Middle East and North Africa, Latin America and the Caribbean, Africa, Asia Pacific, and sorry, I'm having a little bit of a technical difficulty. These are regions that have shared special locations on the world map, not to mention the largest and most diverse communities in the world. And maybe tonight, as we commemorate UN 75, it is an opportunity as we have been conducting consultations around different regions on what is really our future that we want, and to help us set the tone on how we continue to make the UN and perhaps the UN Security Council at that fit for purpose. Without further ado, perhaps we can call on our first speaker, Ms. Karen Smith, Her Excellency, the SG Special Advisor on Responsibility to Protect. Ms. Karen.
Thank you very much. I hope you can all hear me. I also want to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. And it's an absolute pleasure to be able to speak to you all on this important day of peace and in an important year in which we mark the 75th anniversary of the UN. And I'm glad that I'm able to speak to you even though I no longer qualify as a youth. So hopefully you'll bear with me. I'd like to thank the organizers for this invitation to provide the opening remarks to this important event. And I know that I'm certainly not alone in saying that our future truly rests in the hands of young people, and that we really must do everything in our power to remove the obstacles that remain, that limit all of your meaningful participation and leadership in civic and political life. Now, 5 years after the adoption of the Security Council Resolution 2055, I think we've seen important steps being taken to enable young people to play what is an essential role in building peaceful and just societies. The positive developments, I think, speak to the importance of giving youth a greater voice in peace processes. And I think what's important is that this is not only happening at the UN and at the global level, but also regionally. And we've seen regional youth networks emerging that are providing opportunities for young people to share ideas and identify priorities. And I think an event like today's, where these different regional groupings are also able to speak to one another, is equally important. And we've also seen regional organizations that have recognized the importance of engaging with young people and that have started developing projects by which to do this. And I think for me, this underlines the importance of local and regional approaches to peace and security, as the title of today's event indicates. While we know from evidence-based research that there are some common factors when it comes to maintaining peace and recognizing the warning signs of conflict, we also know that context is very important and that there is no one size fits all. In my own work, in my academic work that I do, I focus on alternative perspectives on international relations from the global south. Now, for too long, the voices of those in the marginalized parts of the world have not been heard, and their views have not been taken seriously. And that means that we've had a kind of one-size-fits-all approach based on a particular model that didn't necessarily apply equally everywhere. Now, again, I think there are positive signs that this is changing. And again, it's young people who have been the ones demanding these changes. But notwithstanding this meaningful progress, I'm fully aware that huge challenges remain. This year, of course, our world has been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's clear again that young people have been feeling the impact acutely. And here particularly, I think we should recognize the plight of young refugees, displaced people, and others who are caught up in conflict or disaster, who now face even greater vulnerabilities and risks to their safety. But even before the current crisis emerged, young people were facing enormous challenges. And some of you might have heard UN Secretary General Guterres emphasized during April's Security Council conference on youth, peace and security, where he mentioned the staggering statistic that 1 in 4 young people continues to be affected by violence or armed conflict. And here again, I want to highlight particularly young women who continue to experience unacceptable levels of discrimination and violence. Now, today I'm speaking to you as the Special Advisor to the United Nations Secretary General on the responsibility to protect. And in this position, I'm often challenged about what I call the misconceptions about what this principle entails. So I want to just remind us all of what the responsibility to protect really is in essence about. It was developed largely in response to the genocides that occurred in Rwanda and Srebrenica in the 1990s. And in response to that, in 2005, so now 15, we're also marking the 15th anniversary of the responsibility to protect, all governments, and I want to emphasize this, unanimously, all governments committed to protect their populations from atrocity crimes, by which we mean genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity. In other words, the most gross violations of human rights. And importantly, not just protecting their populations from these crimes, but also from their incitement. And so in a sense, it meant that states accepted the fact that with sovereignty also comes responsibility towards your people. In addition, of course, they also committed not to turn a blind eye when other states were failing to protect their own populations, or worse, when other states were themselves perpetrating atrocity crimes against their own people. Now, the fact that today, sadly, we continue to see atrocity crimes occurring around the world, despite these promises that were made in 2005, I think is because states have simply not lived up to their commitments to protect their own people. And states need to be reminded of this. And here again, I think young people have such an important role to play in reminding states of the promises they made and also pointing out their deficits. I want to also encourage you, I know that your interest is broadly peace and security, but that in engaging with these topics, you look beyond conflict. And the opening speaker already mentioned that we need to take a broader approach to issues of security. Because, you know, in the field of work that I do, where we focus on atrocity crimes, of course, most atrocity crimes occur in situations of conflict, but many do not. If we take Myanmar, for an example. So, you know, if we're also interested in preventing the grossest crimes like genocide, we have to look beyond simply the conflict context. Now, when you work to uphold the commitment to prevent atrocity crimes made by all states in 2005, I also want to emphasize that you should think first and foremost about the critical responsibility of prevention, right? That is the ultimate aim. We don't want to get to the point where we see atrocity crimes happening and we then have to wonder, how do we respond to them? We want to be able to prevent them. And that means working really hard to build strong, resilient, tolerant societies that are based on equality and inclusiveness. And in this task of prevention, member states have a responsibility to guarantee a safe environment for their populations. And I emphasize populations, right? That's the commitment they made, not just citizens. So that means everybody who finds themselves within a particular state's territory, regardless of their nationality, their ethnicity, their class, their caste, their religion, their gender, their sexual orientation, or their political affiliation. And here I also want to emphasize that no region is immune to the risk of atrocity crimes. It's not something that only occurs in the global south. I think this is another kind of misconception that we have. And particularly with the rise of hate speech that we've seen in social media, and this hate speech we see everywhere in the world, including in the so-called global north. And this hate speech reflects increasing levels of intolerance against people due to their religion, their skin color, their ethnicity, or some other marker of identity. It's clear to us that hate is on the rise everywhere. And this is why it's so important that young people like yourselves, who are at the forefront of efforts to promote human rights, bring communities together, that you stand up to oppression and injustice, and you plant the roots of a more inclusive and respectful society. Because while it was heads of states and heads of governments who formally adopted the responsibility to protect their populations 15 years ago, we all have an individual moral responsibility to play our part. And we all face a reality check that's hard to ignore, namely that the task of building necessary resistance and response to the risk of atrocity crimes will likely never find an end. But when taking a step forward can mean saving one life or a number of lives, I think the immensity of the challenge has to be a powerful reason to act rather than a source of discouragement. Now, in my office, we try to advance prevention, not only by working with governments and regional organizations, but also by supporting the work of non-governmental organizations. And this means you. We are all partners in this task. So let me conclude by reiterating my full support for your work. And I look forward to deepening our collaboration, and I wish you much success in the implementation of all your projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. We really appreciate your and your office support for this event. Your presence in itself means a lot to us. I think a lot of my colleagues are actually just messaging me as you were speaking, and they were so amused about how you really say no. Well, it's not that we were amused, but we really appreciate that you really tried to support our theme, because this is a topic that we really want to be able to understand deeper. And that said, I've mentioned already a while ago that majority of the participants in this webinar are coming from the 4 regions in the Global South. And of course, we have our peers from Europe and North America who are also going to be intervening, and then they will have their own regional breakout. But nevertheless, it's suffice to say that the 4 regions mentioned have the most diverse communities in the world, and in fact, the largest populations. And despite the fact that the young people did not live to experience the last World War, so looking back at the whole historical narrative of UN 75 might not be a lived experience necessarily for us, but then at the same time, it's really about looking at what the future we will inherit will be. And so I think it will also be quite meaningful to hear from another UN agency that we invited today to shed more light on the principles of South-South cooperation and how it is that the regions we come from can work together given our shared historicities, and perhaps also shed light on the concept of decolonizing peace. Dr. Amina Al-Rashid, Senior Research and Program Advisor of the UN Office of South-South Cooperation. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon for everyone. And happy International Peace Day for all. I will start my talk on the significance to understand the importance of South-South solidarity for durable peace and inclusive development, as it's recognized by the United Nations and the agencies, the regional organizations, civil society actors. They are committed to work across pillars to achieve sustainable development. So 2030 agenda is in the heart of our work and the heart of youth work as well. We know that 2030 agenda preamble declaration clearly stated that the UN member states are determined to foster peaceful, just, inclusive societies which are free from fear and violence. So we cannot go forward without peace, and that's very important. We must shift our responses to new innovative ways of achieving collective and cumulative impact towards reaching sustainable peace. We have all recognized the deep complexity and interconnectedness of the path to peace and prosperity, and within the context, the role of young people is instrumental. Since our mandate and strategy at the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation is oriented to foster strong collaboration with all United Nations agencies to ensure that knowledge on the transformative power of South-South solidarity become a driver as the world strives to leave no one behind. And now we have recently the Youth, Peace and Security Peace and Security Council resolution that followed after the Women, Peace and Security resolution. So this shows how it's important to accommodate young people and to ensure that we can do knowledge transformation through South-South solidarity. Also, we think that within the context of peace and security, we can build long-term partnership and joint learning initiatives on the added value of South-South cooperation. So we can use South-South cooperation actually to foster for more youth inclusion. So the knowledge product to be offered by our office, South-South Cooperation, does document existing experiences and put forward proposals to continue the development of these emerging areas of work. This is a crucial moment for us, for humanity, in which we have many ideas and actions that we think that are essential to share. We know that more than 400 million young people, it's almost a quarter of the total young people in the world, are currently living in areas affected by armed conflict globally. Yet their involvement in the peace process, political dialogues, is very, very limited. So in 2015, the UN Security Council took the first significant step in recognizing the value of youth participation in these areas by adopting the UN Security Council resolution. As mentioned earlier, the UN Office for South-South Cooperation, we aim at developing and encouraging the development. I think I've been muted recently. I'm not sure. Do you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you, ma'am.
All right. So we think, as I mentioned earlier, the UN Office for South-South Cooperation, we aim to develop positive narratives also about youth, and to encourage that, and also to look at how to encourage even their trust in being part of the political, economic, and social setting in their countries. The Security Council Resolution 2250 and the other secondary resolution 2419 all recognize the positive role of youth in peace negotiation, political dialogues, and engaging in peace process. We think that also beside the United Nations Assembly resolution 74 and 64 in youth disarmament and non-proliferation, it highlights the importance and positive contribution of young people that can make promotion and attainment of sustainable peace and security. So they are really an important and essential actors in peace process. What we need to do is to share experience and real actions and initiatives that matter for young people, and that give them, those who are living in developing countries, the prospect to advance youth for peace. So we had this initiated this project of Youth for South, which is an advanced youth leadership program with many partners. We welcome all partners to this initiative to give young people for developing countries the tool to utilize South-South cooperation for their needs, as well as to scale up solution to reality, to bring sustainable development goal, and to bring everything close to their local communities and to their homes. Youth for South bring concrete opportunity for the young people, supporting capacity building, for training, for workplace expert, for exchange of knowledge, for global network, for funded scholarship, for emerging entrepreneurship, for sustainable growth. And it provides access to experts and supporting capacity building through training, workshop facilities, and offering funded scholarship and supporting emerging entrepreneurship. It's also a platform that can share knowledge between people in the developing countries. So we still have a lot of initiatives. We have a lot of knowledge and ideas that we need to share with each other and to benefit from. We know that around 1.2 billion people live in the global South, and they have the ability to harness the amazing potential of young people and to invest in their capacity, in their entrepreneurship, and in their innovation. This opportunity is provided for them. And I think South-South cooperation is a really good platform to start communicating, to start sharing ideas and views. South-South cooperation can play an essential role in strengthening capacity, guided by the mutual benefit learning, no strings attached. It can leverage for education, for innovation, and expand opportunities to all young people in the developing nations, guided by the mutual benefit in leading for peace, sustainable peace, in implementing sustainable development goals, in carrying out 2030 agenda, and on issues of education, innovation, peace, and prosperity. And we hope that all of you would utilize South-South cooperation, would start dialogue, would value the ideas that you have and the prospects that you have about how we build peace in our nations, how we build peace in our global South and countries. We have similarities, we have ideas, and we have capacity to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amina. We really appreciate also your presence today, as you know, it's quite crucial for our theme and allowing us to understand deeper, perhaps, you know, as an essential part of our identities and our shared historicities, and how do we shape peace together and shape the future of peace together that we want because of that shared lived experience. And as we dig deeper through the role of young people in this bigger discourse of South-South cooperation and peace and security, we first acknowledge also that young people are not homogenous, even in the global South. And that's primarily because we are an ever transitory phase. So, you know, the young people this year may not be next year. And the priorities also change very so often because of our various backgrounds. And therefore, there's a need for constant dialogues with young people and consultations. And for our first youth speaker, I'll be happy to call on my colleague from the grandparents of meaningful youth engagement, if I shall say, UN Major Group for Children and Youth. We have here our organizing partner, Donovan Gutierrez. He's an MIT researcher in Boston, and with mixed heritage himself, can speak to the nexus and emerging issues of young people in peace and security, as well as the 4 regional coordinating caucuses from the South. Donovan?
Thanks, Regine, and hi to everyone. It's a real pleasure to be part of this webinar, to be partners in its organizing and its delivery. And happy International Peace Day to everyone. This is quite an important event, especially, you know, in the context of the UN 75th anniversary, which is also being commemorated today at the General Assembly. Allow us to share a few perspectives on the role of the Security Council and also how to better enhance, you know, some of its functions and its structure. So just to provide very brief context, the UN Major Group for Children and Youth is the General Assembly self-organized and mandated mechanism for youth participation in multiple policy processes across the UN, including sustainable development processes, including the development of the 2030 Agenda, which we were part of, and now its implementation, as well as other pillars of the UN: peace, security, humanitarian affairs, human rights, so on and so forth. What we've been advocating for, you know, for many years, and we've been very happy to see the progress on the YPS agenda. I think a few of the previous speakers have mentioned the 3 youth peace security resolutions dating back to 2250. But there's still a lot of progress that can be made on that front and actually engaging young people meaningfully in the work of the UN. I'll focus more specifically on emerging issues. There's a need for the Security Council and the larger architecture of peace and security at the UN to address non-traditional security threats. Oftentimes we say that the UN needs to address emerging issues before they become emergencies, right? From a global governance standpoint, there's a lot of criticism that that we are reactive to situations rather than proactively reducing threats and risks. And so there's you know, just to provide an example, on July 1st, Resolution 2532 was adopted, specifically calling for a global ceasefire in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Underlying this resolution, which right on face value looks very good, is that it actually took 3 months of negotiations amongst member states for such a global ceasefire to be actually adopted. And during that time, the number of cases, right, increased from 1 or 2 million to now over 30 million. And so, you know, there's a lot of delay and power politics that comes into the play, which really should not be, you know, should not hold back important decisions that need to be made. There are other non-traditional threats that need to be looked at. Climate-induced disasters, are an underlying cause of fragility. They cause conflict. They lead to climate-induced migration, resources, conflicts over natural resources, and this has been sort of a stinging stinging point within the Security Council, with lack of agreement, where essentially the views of the few are really keeping hostage progress for the many, and that needs to change as well. Finally, another example of non-traditional or emerging issues is digital and rapidly emerging technologies. We live in an age of digital interdependence. This was one of the main issue areas of the UN 75 dialogues. And of course, digital technologies can bring a lot of benefit. There is amazing progress that can be made, but there are also risks of enhancing inequalities. We talk about digital divides, especially from from a north-south perspective. There's a concentration of that inequality and lack of access to digital technologies in those regions. There are issues of cyber threats, human rights violations online, the use of data and digital surveillance by states and private entities to control populations, and other challenges around the use of data and digital technologies that are essentially privatizing what should be a global public good. And so actually in the UN, there has been a lot of progress on this. There was a high-level panel on digital cooperation from 2018 to 2019, which eventually led to the launch of a roadmap on digital cooperation just this year. And so, we're eager to see how this can actually be pushed forward, where the design, development, use, and discard of these different digital technologies can be aligned with human rights principles and international law. And really thinking about how we can design digital technologies and systems that promote safety, privacy, and respect for everyone, over, essentially ensuring technology justice as a main component of development justice. Now, finally, just to provide a bit of reflections on the composition of the Security Council and how it can be improved to be more fit for purpose, and in terms very timely for this UN 75 anniversary and the International Peace Day. This is the big elephant in the room. There's a power imbalance that has persisted in the Security Council since its creation, which actually maintains a lot of the colonial type structures that were initially present when the Security Council was created. To provide some statistics, in 1945, there were 51 member states in its creation, 11 Security Council seats, and 5 permanent members. And today, there are 193 member states, only 15 Security Council seats, and still 5 permanent members. Right, so from a trends perspective, this is actually quite regressive, where the P5 are accounting, initially in 1945, accounted for 10% of all the member states and 50% of the global population, whereas today the P5 only account for less than 3% of the member states and about 25% of the global population. So this is really demonstrating, the geopolitics of our world today has changed. The status quo, is regressive, and we live in quite a different reality where multilateralism is more important than ever before. And so finding a new a reform structure for the Security Council is of a priority and has been an overdue process that has been sort of quite slow in the UN. And so, this is really to ensure that the Security Council can and should fulfill its mandate. Otherwise, it might continue to risk losing legitimacy and being slow in adapting to today's global reality. Where we need a Security Council that can redress historical injustices as well as adapt to better respond and prepare for current and future emerging issues and needs. So this needs to be a discussion, a dialogue that we're eager to take part of, that we're willing and active as young people and ready to engage in. It's a long overdue debate, but it needs critical thought. It needs to include the right actors and to be inclusive, to eventually bear fruit to an effective, fair, and inclusive and transparent Security Council that can really fulfill its roles and duties. And as was mentioned by the special advisor, right, sovereignty, of course, is an important and critical component, criteria that countries should push for, but of course comes with mutual responsibility for one another, both our citizens and our neighbors, because there is only one planet, and we need a Security Council that will enhance and ensure the well-being of both people and planet, leaving no one behind. So I turn it back to you, Regine, and thank you so much again for inviting us, and happy to be partners in this event.
Thank you, Donovan. So, by tradition, what we try to do is to make this an intergenerational conversation. So with the youth speaker, we're going to move on to a young at heart, like our mentees, the mentees and the mentors, and then we try to go back to the young people so that we could have, a conversation that doesn't live in silos. So I think there's no better person to respond to what Donovan said, at least in a mentor figure type, than one of our co-chairs of the Global Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security. So as we know, YPS is a universal agenda for all, and there already are genuine policy shifts taking place towards approaches that serve to empower regional and local actors to contribute to the universal agenda of peace. So if we could have a few more words from Ms. Cecile Mazzacorati, UNDPPA and UNFPA, perhaps you could shed some light on the concrete entry points for all this youth idealism for tonight. Cecile, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Regine. I guess I'm at that stage where I'm the young at heart. It's so nice to be with all of you. Happy International Day of Peace to everyone. And I hope you can hear me well, because there are very big storms where I am here in the south of France. So I hope I won't lose you. As Regine said, I'm Cecile Mazzacorati. I'm the co-chair for the Global Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security on behalf of the United Nations Population Fund and the Peace Building Support Office, two of the many UN entities that have been very actively engaged in the youth, peace and security agenda for many years, until before it was actually called YPS, when it was called Youth and Peace Building, before the adoption of Resolution 2250. And I want to reflect a bit on the dynamics between young people's local activism and local interests and priorities and the global level agenda. Because we tend to see with the adoption of Resolution 2250 and the two resolutions that followed, 2419 and 2535, the latest born of the YPS family, we tend to see YPS as a global agenda, and therefore as the question, how do we localize it? How do we make sure it's relevant to the realities of young people's lives, etc.? Which is a good question, but we have to remember that YPS originally comes from young people. It's young people and young peace builders who lobbied member states, who lobbied the UN, who lobbied international youth-focused NGOs to say we need a resolution that would recognize us as for the peace building work we do, who opens the door of our decision makers and local stakeholders, just like we see how 1325 is helping our women colleagues and women-led NGOs. So the agenda wasn't, the idea for this agenda really came from young people. They really pushed for these priorities. And 2250 actually is, as far as I know, I might be wrong, but I think it might be the only Security Council resolution that includes text and language directly coming from young people, because it was adopted a few months after a big forum hosted by Jordan, the Global Forum on Youth, Peace and Security, where the Amman Youth Declaration was adopted, consulted with thousands of young people around the world who said, here are the priorities. And some of these texts actually made it all its way into Resolution 2250. So there has always been this interesting dynamic in the youth, peace and security agenda, where it has really been fed and grown from these perspectives, from young people themselves, from young peace builders, and from their organizations. Another example of this is the progress study on youth peace and security, which was mandated by Resolution 2250 to provide evidence to the Council of how young people contribute to peace. And to provide this evidence, because there actually is not so much work, academic and research work done on why are young people peaceful. There's a lot of work done on why are young people violent. But the methodology that we adopted was to organize hundreds of focus group discussions, consultations with young people at the local level, at the national level, at the regional level, to have, again, young people's perspectives and priorities in, what are we talking about? What are the priorities? And this gave us, I think, different perceptions. For example, on what is peace. In the international arena, we tend to speak about peace as this big political process. It has these warring parties, and you need a formal negotiation to resolve it, etc. And it was very interesting discussing with young people to see that for a lot of them, peace was also very personal. Peace was an experience of everyday life. You're not at peace if you're harassed going to school or going to work in the street. You're not at peace if you're experiencing domestic violence or interfamily violence in your home. Peace was also profoundly gendered in the way young people spoke about it, because everyone highlighted the fact that, of course, young women and adolescent girls are particularly at risk, etc. And I'm saying all that to again say that it's been, I think, really an effort of the youth peace and security community that many of you are part of, to bring these perspectives and bring these experiences of peace, of young peace builders and their organizations directly into the international arena. The latest example that we can think about is the focus on human rights and the protection of young peace builders, who's really been an issue of increasing concern for the youth peace and security community. It has been very rightly highlighted in Resolution 2535, the resolution that was adopted this summer, as a very important area, the question of the protection of young peace builders, the question of the protection of the civic space, the importance for the UN to equip itself with guidelines and mechanisms to be able to protect young peace builders when they're harassed for the work they do, including when they engage with the United Nations. And that is really an issue and a concern that came directly from young peace builders and from the work they're doing. Originally, of the 5 pillars of youth peace and security, the participation pillar was particularly the priority, because it was felt that there was the children and armed conflict agenda, which had a very strong protection mandate, and that the conversation was oscillating between we need to protect children and we need to stop young people from being violent, right? And so the idea of youth peace and security was really to put the emphasis on the positive agency of young people. But more and more after the adoption of 2250, we heard through the consultations for the progress study and the consultations that led to the resolution 2535 that the protection of young peace builders was really an issue of increasing concern. And it should also be noted that the 2 countries that led the negotiations for 2535, the Dominican Republic and France, directly engaged young peace builders and youth-led peace-building organizations as they were thinking about what the resolution should focus on, which I think is an excellent practice. So a number of young people had the opportunity to say, this is a priority, and to really express, for instance, the importance of the question of protection. I know we're running a little short on time. I just want to add a few words on the question of regional organizations and their importance for the youth peace and security agenda. Regional organizations are absolutely central to this work, of course, and to its implementation. They're close to member states. They have the capacity to engage member states on a regional level in a way that's very different from a global entity like the UN. They're also have this capacity to engage with local and national organizations, including youth-led. And many regional organizations have been engaged on the YPS agenda. As you all know, the EU organized a big conference on youth peace and security in 2018. The AU just launched a few months ago its big continental study on youth peace and security. Its Peace and Security Council now has an annual session on youth peace and security. There are 5 African youth peace ambassadors. The Organisation La Francophonie, the Francophonie organization, launched a big appeal last year to fund youth-led peace-building organizations and ended up funding youth-led organizations in Cameroon, Burkina Faso, Mauritania, Togo, Mali, and of course, last but not least, ASEAN has been very engaged also on the question of youth peace and security. And I know there are discussions ongoing towards the organizations of regional level discussions on youth peace and security. So really to hope that the regional level engagement will continue. I think it's absolutely critical in taking the agenda from this global platform with all the limitations that we know and that Donovan very accurately described, to a level that's closer to the regional dynamics. Also because we know very often conflict and peace issues are beyond the national level, but are at the regional level. So I think that again is a reason why having regional organizations is particularly important. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Regine, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Cecile, for always being open to our invitations. So after Cecile, we will be calling on our 4 youth speakers to give very brief interventions, maybe about 2 to 3 minutes, and then we'll move the rest to the chat box so that we can move on to our regional breakouts in about 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, so as you know, the title of this panel is really Next Generation of Leaders in Peace and Security. So we tried to look at young leaders from the P5 countries in the UN Security Council, and we have with us, first and foremost, Mr. Alex Wang from YouthThink Center in Beijing, China. Alex is the founder of YouthThink, one of the leading Chinese youth think and do tanks. So that's how they frame it, think and do tank. He is the initiator of the Chinese youth delegation to the UN Rio Plus 20 and led the Chinese youth participation at UNGA, UNF, CCC, COP, and UNDPI NGO meetings. Alex, we put him as the first speaker in this part because he's also very active in South-South cooperation. So maybe he can shed more light on the Youth for South-South movement. Alex, are you here with us?
Yes, hello, thanks very much, Regine, and hello everyone, all the friends. And I'm very happy to join the talk here, and I also learned some points from the speakers before. I'm thinking that because today is International Peace Day, I was thinking because for many, the friends from different countries, we all found that many young friends, many young people comment online. For example, in different regions, there is a different maybe conflicts zone or conflict topics. And many people comment online that we want to maybe that have the war and we will kill them. So this is some comments we can ever see online, especially commented by some young people. I was thinking that for this day, what kind of attitude we should have is that we should tell our friends around us and also tell ourselves, no matter what kind of challenge or conflict you have, we should always keep peace inside ourselves and try to avoid the conflict, bring the dialogues, try to avoid the war. I think this is a basic attitude we should have. And then how we can do that, I was thinking, and also I was learning from other speakers. I want to summarize that what I feel is that I think there are several points I think is very important for peace and security. The why the countries or different groups have the conflicts and then create war. I think there are the few maybe they have conflicts on certain issues, maybe on land, on water, on different resources, or some historical reasons. But I think if we can bring all the justice and equality to different topics, and we can make sure that people can really enjoy their life, I think somehow this will help us, to build a more peaceful world. So I think the first thing is that we should think about more on social business, creating more social business to bring this equality and justice and social inclusion to different aspects of our society, to create more balance, or to create, to make sure that we can bring the happiness to most of the people. So I think the social business is a concept defined by Professor Yunus. And the traditional business goes to the create all these profits, goes to the personal pocket, but we target on some social problem, and we can create some social business. And then two other points I was thinking is that we should also stress the global citizenship education, which is also part of UN SDG, the quality education. Part of that is that we need to educate all the not only younger generation, but older generations about being a good and responsible global citizen, how we can act as a global citizen. We should learn that and feel that no matter which country you are from, you are connected to each other, you are taking care as a common global home together. I think the last point, I think we should, for all the citizens, we should also push more older governments. We should stress the role of UN. And for this year, we all know that it is 50 years anniversary for UN. We definitely should, there's no other platform which play a role to coordinate all these global affairs. We should definitely all support UN and make this process more effective, and make sure that UN can coordinate and it's not central interest but multi-cooperation. It's South-South cooperation, South-North cooperation, and bilateral, and even more, with more countries. I think we should create more of this cooperation with UN, and also UN can facilitate more. We can support all these UN programs. So this is my three reflections, I think, which is very, very important. As if by the keywords is number one, social business; number two, global citizenship education; number three, support the UN platform. That's it. Thanks very much, Regine, and thanks very much for all the speakers, participants, and all the friends here.
Thank you so much, Alex. Alex, actually, and the next speaker slot I'm going to call Roman, both of them from China and Russia. We often have been calling them for the past few months during our peace and security webinars to give more insight on how Chinese youth and Russian youth see the youth peace and security agenda and how we can work more meaningfully with each other. And we've had really interesting insights around peace entrepreneurship, digital governance through both their presence. So thank you again, Alex. And with that, I turn over to our next speaker. It's supposed to be Dr. Roman Chukova, but unfortunately, there was an emergency, so he's not able to join us today. But he sent a video through one of our colleagues from Friends for Leadership. Rodrigo, are you here to send Roman's message on his behalf?
Yes, I am. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the different time zones around the world. My name is Rodrigo Reis, and I'm a member of Friends for Leadership Network. It is with great pleasure today that I have been invited to briefly present this important network and share, as well as commented by Regina, Roman Chukova video. Let me share my screen with all of you, and let's put this video rolling.
Rodrigo, the volume, please.
Rodrigo, you need to unmute yourself as well so that we can hear Roman's voice.
I'm sharing here my screen, which is supposed to include the audio, but I'm not sure if that's gonna work out.
You should not mute yourself, Rodrigo. If you unmute yourself, I mean, like, then we can hear you. No, again, you muted yourself. Unmute yourself.
Okay, perfect. I'm unmuted at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Rodrigo, should I try my screen share?
Yes, please, Regina, if you may.
From the level of young leaders, civil society change makers, I would like to mention the way how we all can make the international cooperations like better, maybe, or more fruitful. We have set up the Principal Leadership Horizontal Network specifically for this, for sharing the best practices. And the main idea behind Principal Leadership is to find those scalable, already working solutions, and try to implement them elsewhere globally. So if you are interested in following this opportunity, and you join us. And I believe that the more we cooperate, the more we exchange the best practices, the solutions, the knowledge, the wisdom of our people and of all the cultures. And I believe that the more we exchange, the more we cooperate, the better future we will have. And of course, such aspects as peace, as security, they require dialogue, they require trust and shared responsibility. Of course, with the focus on human dignity, human rights, specifically in the approach of people. So I believe if people in our regions will be happy, if people find the ways to cooperate globally, there will be no conflict, and it is in our hands to give this opportunity to people to exchange best practices, to work together.
Okay. Rodrigo, is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I would like to say a few words in this opportunity, and thank you, Regina, for sharing Roman's remarks. The UN is marking its 75th anniversary at a time of great disruption for the world, compounded by an unprecedented global health crisis with severe economic and social impacts, as well as major challenges related to sustain peace around the world, with a special focus for guaranteeing human rights and peace for young people. I would like to thank all the young minds participating here today, and say a big thank as well to Miss Karen Smith, Miss Amina Ostrad, and Cecile Mazzarucci, and obviously for my colleague Donovan Gutierrez, which all of them are both young at heart and young as well as representing the people around the world in this important day. As I mentioned, I'm a member of Friends for Leadership Network, and it's really with a great pleasure that I've been invited to briefly present this important network. Friends for Leadership is a network of young entrepreneurs and leaders from more than 60 countries who are involved in promoting multilateral economic and humanitarian projects in various spheres, from social entrepreneurship to sustainable cities. Our members are involved in multilateral and economic projects and in various spheres towards achieving the SDGs and the new urban agenda. Friends for Leadership Network supports all regions, including Asia Pacific, Latin America, MENA, Africa, Europe, and North America. We are a horizontal platform that brings plural backgrounds together. In the past, Friends for Leadership have organized the online meetup of the UN 75 celebration and cities that we won in a session that was held with the support of the UN and UN Habitat. And also the online meetup, Global for Governance in Digital, and in which the discussion was held online as part of the UN virtual events, Young People's Role in Driving Digital Trends During Uncertain Times. And this was organized with the support of the UN 75, the UN Youth Envoy, and the UN Major Group for Children and Young People. I would like to conclude just saying again, thank you for all the participation from the UN representatives and all young people as well, part of this session today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo and Roman, for those remarks from Friends for Leadership. So from two youth-led organizations, we had Youth Inc. and then Friends for Leadership. We moved back to an institutional partner and one of the close partners actually of youth-led organizations, UNMGCY. We have, of course, our friends from UNDESA who have come here to talk about the YANIB Youth Caucus and how UN agencies engage with youth constituencies, and at the same time, the Youth Delegates program, where you have a different setup with youth in decision-making spaces. So two different platforms. Miss Aliyah Mossad, are you here? Could you please share your thoughts?
Thank you, Regina. And hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. And thank you to the organizers for putting this together, and also happy International Peace Day. So my name is Aliyah Mossad, and I'm an associate expert with UNDESA within the Division of Inclusive Social Development, and specifically within the Program of Youth Unit. And I'm also the coordinator of the UN Youth Delegate Program. So as Regina said, I'll start by providing an overview of the UN Youth Delegate Program, and then I'll mention a bit about the Interagency Network of Youth Development, the Youth Caucus, and then lastly, ways in which we can work on increasing youth delegates from the Global South in the UN Youth Delegate Program. So we at the UN, we believe that youth should participate in decision-making processes since their outcomes affect both their lives and their futures, as many of you have discussed. And in addition to being able to mobilize support, the contributions and unique perspectives of young people need to be factored in when shaping the future. So that's why we find the UN Youth Delegate Program to be really important. It's a form, as I said, of youth participation at the UN, and this is via the inclusion of young people among a country's official delegation to various intergovernmental meetings. So they are actually official delegates when they come to the United Nations. They have an official delegate badge, and they're with all the members of their mission and their delegates that are sent during the various meetings that they're able to attend. So being a youth delegate allows for youth to bring their voices and issues front and center to their respective government officials that are working day in and day out on issues such as policy development, for example, in the UN system. And this type of inclusion is not new, although some of you may be hearing about it for the first time. There's been a long-standing practice of many member states, including youth delegates, and some even have had youth delegates for over 4 decades. And this growing focus on youth is reflected in the increasing numbers of member states that are sending youth delegates to the UN. So back in 2008, there were about 38 youth delegates that attended the UN General Assembly, and then a decade later, There were about 68 youth delegates in 2018. And I can tell you last year we had around the same amount. And this year I'm still getting names sent to me, but there is a sizable amount even given the pandemic situation. Member states are including youth delegates in their delegations. An annual youth delegate program we feel can be considered a best practice wherein one or more delegates have a specific term, such as 1 or 2 years. And setting up an annual program has a number of benefits that we see, like including increasing meaningful engagement, building institutional knowledge, and ensuring continuity and clear mandates and better oversight when it's done that way. And ideally, such a program allows time for young people to also consult nationally with their peers, build consensus on policy priorities with youth at the national level, and input these into the intergovernmental processes with the support of their government. So now the decision to have youth delegates or establish a youth delegate program is actually made, again, by the member states. And it's only one way for young people to engage in the work of the UN. At the regional level and within their countries. So to clarify, we at UNDESA, we coordinate the program at the global level, and that's after they've been established and approved by their government at the national level in the respective country. So the roles and mandates country to country do differ and are generally determined by the authority that's responsible for youth development in the respective countries. So sometimes it's their Ministry of Foreign Affairs, sometimes it goes through Ministry of Youth if the country has one. It just differs country to country. But regardless, when they do come to the UN, they are working really closely with their permanent mission because ultimately they're going to be coordinating work with the mission when they're in the UN. In addition, some member states have their UN Youth Delegate programs decided in consultation with their national youth structure or even sometimes with their national United Nations Association. So that's an overview of the UN Youth Delegate program. And then I'll go on to talk a bit about the Interagency Network on Youth Development and its Youth Caucus. So the UN Interagency Network on Youth Development is a network that consists of 55 UN entities whose work is relevant to youth as well as members of the Youth Caucus called the Interagency Network Youth Development Youth Caucus. And I'll give you more details on the Youth Caucus in a minute. But first, let me say that the Interagency Network provides a forum for cooperation and support. It offers an opportunity for ongoing exchange of information on youth development, including through knowledge management initiatives and tools, and it supports cooperation to promote youth development through joint advocacy initiatives and other forms of cooperation, as well as facilitating and supporting youth involvement and participation in the UN system and its programs or initiatives at all levels. I can also tell you that when the youth delegates are involved with the UN, a lot of times we tap into the interagency network when the youth delegates perhaps want to set up events or meetings with different UN entities. This is a very useful platform for us to tap into, and it's very coordinated. So the Interagency Network has 3 co-chairs, and we at UNDESA are the permanent co-chair of the network. And as such, we coordinate the administrative functions of the network and provide support and continuity to the other co-chair and the network as required. And then the second co-chair is actually selected by members and rotates on an annual basis. So for the 2020 to 2021 cycle, it's actually UNODC that's the second co-chair, and they've done amazing work with us thus far. And in addition, since 2019, the Interagency Network has also included a third co-chair that's permanent, and this is the Interagency Network Youth Development Youth Caucus. And the idea of including the Youth Caucus was a recommendation that stemmed from joint work between MGCY and their Interagency Network of Youth Development Working Group on Youth Engagement. And this recommendation was introduced in 2018 and then adopted in its current format in 2019, so just last year. But they've been doing great work thus far with us. And so since 2019, they've been working with us, and they also rotate their co-convener, which is identified from within the caucus. And the objectives of the caucus is to coordinate and facilitate formal youth engagement in the work of the Interagency Network. So the membership of the Interagency Network Youth Caucus includes the focal points of the formal youth constituencies linked with UN processes, the UN entity that's specific to youth engagement mechanisms, a broad formal youth constituency in the UN, and then civil society youth entities that are already engaging in general with the Interagency Network coordination, And then lastly, youth engagement mechanisms of UNGA observers. So that's a bit about the Interagency Network and the Youth Caucus. And then regarding the Global South, which is, I understand, going to be discussed in more depth with the regional breakout groups, we do recognize for the UN Youth Delegate Program that there is underrepresentation of the Global South within the program, although there have been member states from the Global South that have sent youth delegates. There are a couple that are sustainable, but there are that are sporadically year to year sending youth delegates, but not as much as other regional groups. So what we've seen is in the past, there's been some member states that have offered to provide funding to countries of the Global South to send youth delegates to the UN in New York, for example. But regardless, everybody, especially youth organizations, can really help lobby their government for the inclusion of youth in their delegation. So we at UNDESA are advocating for this, but the most efficient way for youth from the Global South to be added is for themselves to put pressure locally and possibly in partnership with regional platforms and bodies to lobby their government to say, hey, it's really important for us to be included. And they can show, for example, what I'll mention lastly is like we've created the UN Youth Delegate Guide that's available on our website. It shows examples of countries that have set up programs, how they're running, and how member states, if they're interested, can set up a program for their respective country to send youth delegates to the UN. So it's a really helpful tool for those that are considering being part of the UN Youth Delegate Program. So with that, I'll wrap up and back to you, Regine, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alia. Thank you. I think that's it's quite important for us to understand those two streams of youth engagement that we've been working on with DESA and the wider YANID. We have two last youth speakers to somehow conclude this panel. Very briefly, I've asked them to share maybe in a minute a brief summary of what they will be sharing in more detail during the regional breakout. So there will be a breakout from the with the Global North, Europe and North America. But at the same time, for this panel, we have Ms. Megan Doherty, young ambassador from the UK, and also Ms. Daphne Frias from March for Our Lives USA. So they will give us maybe an overview of how they see meaningful North-South cooperation of young people. Megan?
Hi, so I'm just briefly going to talk about regionally about involving young people in meaningful peace processes. I'm from Northern Ireland and we still have religious segregation in our schools, and it means a lot of young people don't meet other young people from different religious backgrounds until they're a full adult. So there's programs such as Amazing the Space that enable young people to reach out and have meaningful relationships with people that they wouldn't otherwise have not met. Internationally, the UK has made a large financial commitment to women mediators across the Commonwealth, and that's one of the ways that the UK does reach out in terms of North and South. We do have UK young ambassadors to the Commonwealth, and they interact in the Commonwealth Youth Forum. We are currently advocating for a UK young ambassador to the UN, as we currently don't have one. And as the UK is now leaving the EU, we'll also not have UK young ambassadors to the EU. So we think it's really critical that we ensure that we still have good international youth representation. And I'll hand back to Regine.
Thank you, Megan. Appreciate how brief that was. But please, for those who wish to know more about that, kindly put the Europe and North America breakout on your name so that we could move you to that breakout in maybe in a minute or so. Daphne, would you like to say something to the big group? Please unmute yourself.
Sorry, there you go. Thank you so much for having me, everyone. Just briefly, I want to talk about the work I do with March for Our Lives. We are a youth gun violence prevention group based in the United States. A lot of the work that we've done this year has been centered around increasing diversity amongst the young people whose voices we hear from on a daily basis. A lot of that work I've been a part of, which includes creating diversity coalitions to represent young people from Latin America and the Caribbean, including young people from Africa, and including young people from the general global South. A lot of these young people are either first-generation American or have sought refugee status within the United States and are wanting to tackle the issue of gun violence prevention here in the United States, as well as possibly having experienced it in their home countries. And this process of hearing their voices over the past year has really helped us to understand that young people see their peace building and their personal peace as connected to a larger community peace building effort, and has also helped open up passageways for North-South cooperation and collaboration. And I'm very excited to see how we can continue to further those points of collaboration.
Thank you, Daphne. It's good to see you again. Okay, so I know everybody's been waiting for the regional breakout, and without further ado, we will move to that. I just maybe want to explain that after all these institutional partners and views, we briefly tried to share, their work around the regions. This has been quite a long process, about 1 to 2 years. We started with a regional checklist that UNOI, MGCY, and then some regional youth councils tried to put together, and we launched that over the last summer. And then we will have these regional breakouts during this webinar, and hopefully after that, speak more about coalition, youth-led coalition building with IYC4Peace. So that's like the process that we had in mind while working with these youth-led regional coalitions. Okay, so without further ado, we automatically assigned many of you to the regional breakouts, so you will just be transferred automatically. And then we will try to be very quick with the ones that have not yet been assigned. So the moderators are already there, as well as the repertoires. Okay, we'll see you again in the Can we remind everyone to try to put the regions of your choice beside your name, your Zoom name, so then we can easily move you? Because some of you did not fill up the form. Thank you.